So while I was in the Bahamas, I was able to travel to a primeval forest, which is a really fascinating area. And most of the Bahamas has been slashed and burned over the years, but there's been a few patches of undisturbed forest which remain, which is really fascinating. And Pericles Maillis has made a national park out of the primeval forest, and he's going to give us a tour. So check this out.
We don't even know all the chemistry of these trees, but poison wood. What happened? They chopped it out. Oh no, so see one right here. Yeah, if you're going to do work in the Bahamas, you're going to have to make that part of your subconscious mind.
Okay.
So that you, because it's everywhere.
Don't rub up on it.
So it lives up to its name?
Yeah.
Poison wood. Metopion, which in Greek means poison. Toxiferum in Latin means poison bearer.
So is a
So
rash?
it's a poison bearer.
That sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, it gives you a bad itch and rash and blind in your eyes. But its leaves are rich in manganese, and its fruit are rich in lipid and protein. And the parrots can't fledge their young unless they have poison wood. And in the years when there was none, the pigeons have hell to raise their young, like trying to raise babies on Kool-Aid. A lot of understory plants, but the poison wood leaf we know makes manganese. The mahogany leaf makes iron. And there's others and others. And then there's a million fungi and bacteria and insects in this mold. And they make enzymes and instant plant food. There are more cinnamon trees in here than we know of in the whole of New Providence, big and small. This is actually the youngest part of the forest. Burn it and you get 2-3 years of good crops, and then they eventually developed it to where it took about 15 to 20 years to grow back enough to make a leaf mold that was thick enough to grow another crop. And that became the pattern. Now, a lot of these trees have beautiful wood, and nobody even thinks about them or worries about them. You read that Primeval Forest article about one of the few forests that pays for its own clearing.
Yes.
But anyway, you'll see the kind of trees that they were talking about.
Oh, great.
Hopefully.
Now, do you have to do any sort of management of the primeval forest to keep out any invasive plants, or doing any sort of clearing that's necessary?
They ruthlessly take out anything that birds bring in from the landscape. And it took us a long time, even after we got the land, then we had to wait to fence it. And we were terrified of timber pirates coming in and taking out our few great timber trees.
Oh, yep.
And that happened. Now you see this one here? This is horseflesh. In that Schoaf article, he mentions horseflesh mahogany. But this isn't West Indian mahogany, but the wood is beautiful, hard, waterproof for 30 years. And so they wouldn't cut a tree like this.
Right, they built it around it.
No, they would dig it out so they could use the frames, the root, and the so they could get the frames for boats. That's one of your agroforestry potential trees.
Absolutely.
But I once planted about a dozen of them, and they grew straight, beautiful. And then one by one, some kind of an insect drilled and killed them. So we don't know everything. And this is where you can really learn about geology, See how there's no soil?
Mm-hmm.
There's no soil. Solid rock for 25,000 feet. In some places, you're going to Eleuthera, you'll see a lot of it. You have an ice age, Sahara-blown clay, red, and it deposited from jet streams from the Sahara. That holds iron, but there's none of that here. So all you have is that veneer of leaf mold.
Right.
But the leaf chemistry and the microbe chemistry makes this enzymes to make this luxuriant growth. Anyway, you see this pothole?
Mm-hmm.
This is where we teach children and adults in geology.
Wow.
In the last interglacial period, when there was global warming, the sea level was high enough that this was underwater, and then it was a beach ridge. And then as the sea fell, the sand lithified into hard rock, and then birds brought trees from the mountains of Cuba, seeds from the mountains of Cuba, wind brought seeds, but especially the white-crowned pigeon. And that's why we have to keep them alive for the next ice age, if we go underwater completely, so that they could do it again. But anyway, leaves make tannic acid, and all rain is slightly acidic. So as the sea level dropped and rain fell, and limestone is porous, so the rainwater would go in and float on top of the seawater, and then it would create what they called a water table or a water lens floating on top of the salt water. And because it's acidic, it would start dissolving. And so this was dissolved out by water where there was weakness in the system. And you see the shelves, where the shelves come way out, there was a rapid drop in sea level. And where the ledges go way in, climate was stable for a long time, and the water had time to dig its way in.
Ah, okay.
Okay? And then as the sea level went down, the freshwater lands went down, so you have a big hollow, what was a water tank is now an empty space with no steel to keep it up, and trees, roots, and hurricanes, they're still dissolving through cracks and things, and then in a hurricane they act as levers and the roof collapses. One of the few places you can see the roof boulders. You see them down there?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah. One of the because most of them are covered up with plant material. In the bottom of our potholes, when the backhoe gets down 15 feet, the roof boulders come out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, so I'm not going to name every tree here, and not everything's timber, but the horseflesh is. Okay, the fig trees are not, but they have even in the Amazon, they are keystone species.
Yeah, I watched a documentary about some Amazonian fig trees,
Yeah.
and one tree in particular, and they documented every species of animal, insect, bird
That's
that
the
like.
strangler fig.
Oh, yep.
I nearly fell off my chair when the girl started talking about that in the expert conference,
Oh, really?
and she showed a picture of a strangler fig. And so it's so much more valuable here, where there's so less.
Sure.
Cinnamons, lots of cinnamons in this forest. It took us a long time to open this, because even now the cruise ships won't approve this as a safe place, which we think is bullshit. Big.
What sort of wildlife do you see in here?
Yeah, birds.
Yep.
We haven't introduced raccoon that was brought in the 1760s during the French-Indian War.
Mm-hmm.
Snakes, lizards. We don't have any other land mammals. There was one that went extinct on all the big islands. See, that's a horseflesh tree.
Okay.
Okay, and this one got turned over in a hurricane and turned back.
Mm-hmm.
But see how they would get a frame out of that?
Oh, sure.
And they would square it. Beautiful wood. In Andros, there is a place where there is actually a forest of them.
Hmm.
Far away, and we don't want anybody to find it or timber it so we could make it a park.
Mm-hmm.
There's an interesting
Indian
historical
mahogany.
thing. The native name for this wood is Madeira.
Mm.
Madeira. You ask a Bahamian what a mahogany, they won't even know, most of them. But they'll tell you this is a Madeira tree.
Mm-hmm.
The
Beautiful.
Spanish word for good timber, not any particular variety.
Okay.
Wood is Madeira.
Mm-hmm.
But the Portuguese name is Madeira.
Mm.
And what people don't realize, and so we want to know, how did we learn the Portuguese name instead of the Spanish name? And then if you go back to history, there was the last crusade when the Portuguese, the king and the whole aristocracy and the whole army went across to conquer Mauritania. And the Arabs led them into the desert and wiped them out. Who wasn't killed became slaves. The king, none of the nobility ever seen or heard of again. And for 75 years, the crown of Spain and the crown of Portugal were united. And the Portuguese were Spanish. And that's how they claimed the Amazon. That's how Brazil got the Amazon, because when the Pope divided the world, Brazil was only a little nipple sticking out into the Atlantic. But when the Spanish and the Portuguese crown were united, then they were all brothers. And they were coming here too. And somewhere they must have crossed with the Bermudians, who you will read about if you get that in the Eye of All Trade. They used to come here from it's mentioned in that book, from mahogany.
Okay.
So somewhere they learned it from the Portuguese, and then they passed it on to our charter colonists. That's quite a magnificent
Yes.
tree.
Wow.
But back in 1990, they figured it was, at that time, only 60 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a primeval tree at all.
Wow.
But like I said, if you had a client later on, if you got into it and you got some Bahamian counterparts, and there's rich people that own thousands of acres, and now they have to pay 1.5% on them. Foreigners, they don't tax
Sure.
undeveloped Bahamian land yet. That's a mastic. Now that's a timber tree. But if you cut it down and leave it, within a month or two, wasps turned it into pulp.
Really?
So the old timers used to cut them and put them in salt water to pickle for a while. And then you could drive it into muck for a piling,
Okay.
or you could saw it and make wonderful timber. All right, I'm going to watch all from here. Don't take too long. But the geologists wouldn't let us open the park unless we made this feature. So you could go down 1 minute. You'll see the ledges. And see another big mastic tree there. See, in Columbus's journal, he was describing trees that were, in modern measurements, 40 to 70 feet.
Yep.
And nobody believed
Right.
it. But, you know, that's at least, isn't that a 50-foot tree?
Sure.
So
I'd say
you
so.
think about 150,000 years, trees got pretty big.
Oh yeah.
Okay, you go down.
Until they got slashed down, they were tall. Yeah.
Now the timbering here started with the Spanish. You know, it didn't just start with the loyalists. All through the 1500s and 1600s, when Cromwell started his war against Spain to capture the West Indies from Spain, and they colonized the Bahamas. His spies had reported that the Spanish go thither annually and yield a great harvest of valuable timber. Going down